Welcome everyone to Awesome Truth, a wrestling book club. I'm your host, Steve Semino, and with me as always is my co-host, Walter Wank. Hey, Walters.
Hello, Steven. How's it going?
My friend, it is going very well. We are back on Awesome Truth, and today, Walt, we are continuing on the road to WrestleMania. It's Mania season. How excited are you for the most wonderful WrestleMania ever, no doubt to come, WrestleMania 42?
How excited am I? That's a good question. One that even after all these weeks and months of build, I still don't really quite have an answer to. How excited are you?
I'm looking at the card right now. I know we've done this already. It does have a lot of matches on it. So if you're looking for singles matches, there are single matches galore on this, and an unsanctioned match, a series of matches. But I guess the question we should ask, Walt, in coordination with what we're discussing this week, will any of the matches at WrestleMania 42 make the list of the greatest WrestleMania matches ever? What do you think this far away? Do you think there's any chance that these are one of these matches coming up is one of the best of all time?
Uh, Finn Balor versus Dom. No, I have no. I truly do not have an answer to that. I don't believe so on paper, but I could be proven wrong. I mean,
You
some of these
could
I'm looking
be.
at.
Especially if we look at the list, and that's what we're talking about today, Walt. If you go on YouTube and you look up greatest WrestleMania matches, you will find a 50 match list that WWE put together. 50 matches all on YouTube, all from WrestleMania that they put together from 1 to 10. 1 to 50. 1 to 10's in there too, plus 40 others. This list was created last year, so it doesn't have last year's Mania, which is good because last year's Mania is one of the worst of all time by many metrics. I know there were a couple good matches in there. When we watched one of them, available on our archives, awesometruth.libsyn.com. But beyond that, it has matches from the other 40 years of WrestleMania. And looking at this list, well, we want to talk about it because it's a great excuse to just sort of break down what is a good WrestleMania match. Like, is it legacy? Is it recency? Is it history? Like, what? There's a whole cavalcade of reasons why something might make this list, but I think it's a good time for us to sort of sit down and say, is there a way to make an objective list like this, and what variables come into play?
Be curious if what metrics, if any, they use to curate this list. And to be on the nose with this, this is the first ever YouTube playlist we've ever reviewed on
Yes,
this podcast,
yeah.
which is what this is. It's a list, but it's a video playlist. And I guess God bless WWE for like just giving these matches away for free. What was the point of having their own network with like the content archives if like they're just gonna give it away for free on YouTube, like the
Yeah.
greatest matches ever? Why the
Imagine you
fuck would I
told
ever
someone that
watch a
10 years
SmackDown?
ago, 15 years ago when we were watching wrestling and say, oh, by the way, I know you're all excited and pay $10 a month for this, but soon you'll have to pay $0 because all the good matches are available, yeah, on a big giant playlist for your ease.
Yeah. But so to the original question, which is what makes a good WrestleMania match? It's a cop out to say there's a je ne sais quoi to it. And when you look at some of these on the top 10 at least, you can kind of point to there's like some magic secret sauce to a lot of these matches that you can't really quantify. But I do think that looking at the larger 50 selections, there is this weird balancing act of like recency versus like historical bias.
Hmm.
And it seems to ping pong back and forth. And especially because there's not a whole lot of selections from like the 20 years ago mark. Like there just seems to be this just kind of gap in the list in
Yeah.
certain years that just like are not accounted for.
80s, early 90s, up to like, the end of the Attitude Era. Big break with the occasional drop in. And then we're back
Right.
on board from like 2010 on.
Yeah. Even Ruthless Aggression has a few on that made it into the top 50.
It
But
does. But
but
it's the
yeah, once
ones
you
you'd
get past
expect
Ruthless
though.
Aggression,
There's no surprises from that era, I would say.
exactly, yeah. And then I mean, well, it's talking about surprises, like just holistically before we really hone in on like some of the better ones or the top 10. Anything that sticks out to you that is like I would have never
Well,
never put that on the list or omissions.
I don't know about omissions, but I will say, again, if you look, if you have this list up in front of you, it's easier. But we'll call out some of the highlights, I think, so you can sort of paint a picture in your mind. I am a little not impressed is not the right word, but I think it is good that Bret Hart versus Owen Hart from WrestleMania 10 is number 11. Like I just think that is a very good example of a match. It's sort of like a building block Mania match. Like it did not end that feud by any means. It was sort of the hanging thread of Bret ultimately winning the title that night is Bret won the title, but what about Owen? Like Owen has a win over him, and this is a lingering thread, which maybe was never resolved as good as it should have been. But I think that is. I just don't like the idea that being a main event gives you extra gravitas or extra, relevance or extra excellence. Like I just don't think that's necessarily true. Like, and one of the most egregious examples of that is Roman Cody from which Roman Cody is this from 40. So WrestleMania from
Finish the story.
yeah, finish the story, which is not very good. But Cody does finish the story. But if you look at just the most glaring thing there is it's 59 minutes. The other ones are there's a lot of 20s, 25s. The aforementioned Bret Owen is 24 minutes. So that is just full. That there's a lot of bloat there. There's a lot of bullshit there. We've talked about it on the show, I believe. And there's so I just think that is an example of something that is puffed up certainly because of recency, like you said, but also I think because of this false sense of importance because of what it ultimately meant storyline wise. Whereas Bret versus Owen is part of a very good story in its own right, but it's just is a piece of the puzzle in a very intriguing and I think excellent way in on a shorter scale, a quicker match. I just think that's the kind of thing I'd like to see that celebrated because I think there's obviously just as much room for that as there is for grand spectacle to end the show.
Yeah, and well, first off, the 59 minutes is a huge asterisk because as we learned in last week or last installment, there can be close to, if not more than 20 minutes of intros
Intro,
alone on
sure,
these
of
things.
course.
I don't think Bret and Owen had 20 minutes of walking the 20 feet from the entrance of Madison Square Garden to like the ring that night. But
Yes. But I will say
that one is
I
actually,
just watched the beginning of Michael's Taker from 25 because that's ranked number 1 on the list. That has a bunch of big obviously Michaels and Taker both are intro guys and that match is 42 minutes, It's on its YouTube runtime. So like there's a way to do that is not and that's a great match, that's the number 1 match of all time and the bloat there is significantly less than there would be 15 years later.
I saw some stat today and I'm going to pull it up because it was like Undertaker has 92 minutes of entrance time in WrestleMania collectively in his career. I'm pulling it up and it's 97 minutes and 20 seconds of Undertaker entrance time.
Wow,
So
that's
just
wild.
not even that's I saw that I didn't even think
Yeah,
twice. I'm like, of course
you're
he
like,
is.
yep, this he sure does. But do you remember this 25 entrance? Like I hadn't seen it in forever. Michaels gets the more elaborate entrance. He gets to come down
Sounds from
with the
heaven.
the religious type music playing, and then it segues right into HB the Sexy Boy, which is great. But Michaels gets the more grandiose of the entrances, which is always interesting.
Yeah, well, it's the heaven and hell play. I think
Sure, of
was
course.
the first one. The second one was just the retirement. But
Yep.
I'm glad you brought up Bret and Owen. Not to like talk about just one out of 50 matches,
No,
but
but it's a good one though, I think.
that one surprised me a lot because one, the first thing is that opened the show, and I
Yes.
think that it's nice that in the top 10, well, it's 11th, but like there's a space for hey, by the way, the match that opens the show sometimes is just as important as the match that ends the show, and I would argue in the case of WrestleMania 10, it is more important because which is another piece of this, which was an original question you had, is like what makes this list and how do you determine that? It's like there's the history angle. There's like in a vacuum, is this even a good match? Is it like the recency? Like part of this is like, did this matter in the grand scheme of like each character's arc? Which is why I argue I would argue that the Cody and Roman piece like does deserve its flowers. Maybe not top 5, but like
Hmm.
the Bret and Owen match was more important than Bret and Yoko, and then set up the entire next year of storylines. And I think that has to be a consideration in a sense that, like, if they just had a match and then they moved on, that I think that's less impactful and less meaningful than if it has a lasting impact on like the programming for the next year, or in some cases, in Michael's Taker's case, it was the better part of the next decade. Is Undertaker streak and Michaels and then H. So that matters. Like
Yep.
I believe that matters.
And it
So
also it sort of sets up this is not every WrestleMania match falls into this binary sort of system, but some WrestleMania matches, certainly a lot of the main events more do more often than not. But there are the Mania main events or the big Mania matches, let's say, that are the end of something, you know, like this is over,
yeah,
we are putting a capper on this, it's happening at the biggest night of the year. And then there are the ones that are, if not usually not the beginning of a story, but the, you know, midpoint or the pivot to a more interesting side of the story, or a sort of tendril breaks off and they do something a little different. And those are, and like when they choose to do one or the other is always very fascinating because sometimes, but Mania 10 is a great example of sort of doing both in the same night in the sense that, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but when Brett beats Yoko, they do like a whole picking Brett up on their shoulders thing, right? Don't they all do like a hooray, you beat the bad guy?
yeah, that was a big thing they did back
Yeah,
then.
which is stupid because like Brett faced Yoko the year before, and like it was just it wasn't like Yoko was like the greatest threat ever facing WWF. Like, it was just a
Right.
big Japanese
To
guy
be to
that
be
still a wrestler.
fair, they did laud Lex Luger for beating him via countout
They
that
did. That's true.
SummerSlam before, so, and with the
That's a
whole
good.
shoulder sitting on the shoulders bit.
That's a good point. So they really were doing that a ton those days. And I guess they did make when Hulk beat him at 9. I don't know if they picked him up on their shoulders, but they certainly treated it like it was, oh my god, you know. So I guess the concept there was Yoko was treated like this monster. But anyway, regardless, like I said, the best thing about that the 10 in my memory is we end with that, but we also end with the like I said the lingering thread of what's going to happen with Owen. You know, so it's just in terms of Vince's storytelling, which is usually not very layered and complex, and you know usually is like story begins, story ends, then new story begins, story ends. You know, like but in this case, it was the rare example of yeah, Brett and Yoko is wrapping up. Brett is now the champion again, all is well. But then the Owen thing with 2 hours ago, the Owen thing became a legitimate concern for Brett to think about. You know, and it's just like it's a rare example of that occurring in on this big night, and the fact that it's sort of recognized by putting that in the top 11 is well worth it because I do think it adds a layer to what we're saying about big matches too. Like not only does have to be a legitimately good match objectively in by various metrics, but does it have some storyline relevance like you were saying that extends beyond its purpose, you know? And that's a great example of one that does.
Yeah, absolutely. And God, there's so much to say about that. I mean, like even though like we're talking about like 50 matches, so of course there's a lot to say. I look at this list and just a few standouts from the bottom part of the list is uh yeah, well, first off, anytime I see The Rock and Austin in the list, like this is might be an unpopular opinion. I can't remember one fucking thing from
We
any of
we
those
saw one of them
matches.
live too.
We sure did. I couldn't tell you one. I mean, I know Mankind was a reference. Those matches, I would argue, are not top 50 worthy, only because I truly don't remember a damn thing from them. Like they're
No,
very unmemorable
they
to
were.
me.
Yeah, it was. Those are very classic examples. I think of just culmination matches. You know, like there's usually a pretty good story to it. Obviously, we all remember the Austin heel turn and like the hype packages and the build up and just the fact that it was the two biggest stars of that era, if not two of the biggest stars of all time. So they get their flowers for all of those elements. Those elements are usually pretty well done and stand out. But yeah, in terms of ding ding ding, what happens 15 minutes for the 15 mints after that, your guess is as good as mine. You know, I have no idea.
Right. Uh, uh, Gunther, Drew
Actually,
Mack,
our match
Sheamus.
isn't even on here, is it? So it looks like it's just 17 and 19. So 15, which was I think the worst of the three by most standards, did not make the list. So
Is 15 not on here? I thought I did see that.
I see.
Maybe yeah.
I'm seeing 5 is 17, and I'm seeing 19 is 13, and then I don't think there's the other one on here.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Which
Yeah,
again, I think I think that's I think most people would agree that that is correct.
another fun fact I read today is Austin has never walked into WrestleMania as champion, which that one was surprising to me because I'm like, yeah,
Really?
I guess he was either chasing every time
So in
or
all
what
three Rock
whatnot.
matches was Rock the champ?
Uh, well, the third one it wasn't for the title. The
Oh,
second one,
gotcha.
17, he was the champ, and Austin beat him,
And
I
15, he
guess.
certainly was the champ. Yeah. So,
Yeah, yeah. So that was
wow.
the sorry. I guess the my Instagram algorithm just caught me on a good day and was like, hey, here's a bunch of like cool WrestleMania facts. I'm like, thanks, internet. I
Wow.
appreciate
It's as if you know that I'm talking about WrestleMania very shortly.
that. There's a few, like we talked about this, I think, off the air, but like obviously this is an old list. I would have put Bianca and Sky and Rhea Ripley on this list. That was excellent from last
Yes, which we
year.
should say that was a friend of the show, Matt Rice, brought that up to us after our last episode too, and said, because I think we mentioned that the Punk Reigns Rollins match was the best match on the card, and Matt reminded us it wasn't even the best three way on the card. There was the other three way is regarded as the best,
Yeah,
which is totally
yeah.
fair.
Editors note. I think we said it was the best match of the night one,
Yeah,
comma night one was so bad, epically
yeah,
bad. Because I think that the second three way started night two with the
that
women's
sounds
title, and
correct. Yeah,
everybody regarded that as the best match, which
yep,
no arguments here.
absolutely not.
Yeah, yeah. Some of the women's title matches definitely stand out. I mean, I think for good and bad reason, ultimately, because you know you're not going to see a women's match on this list pre 2000 like
Yeah, no, you sure
16.
are.
But
It does. So
yeah,
we should
but
say that Ronda, Charlotte, Becky is number 10 on the list. And that's, I understand that feels like I think the list is relatively fair in terms of the recent stuff they include. Not a ton of it is eyebrow raising. It's not like they're trying to convince you that a bad match is good. I don't think that, to their credit, this list does not do a lot of that. Like there's not a lot of weird Triple H, main events on here. There are those 30-minute bore fests with Roman or Orton or
yeah,
any of those guys. Like they don't this list does not try and trick you into thinking any of that matters more than it did. But they do have that match that the women's main event in the top 10, and that feels like that was clearly a match. Everyone was happy that it was going to be the main event. They did a good job building towards it. Obviously, everyone wanted to see Becky win, but I don't think anybody really looks back at that match and thinks it was a top 10 all time match. Like it was rushed. It was a little sloppy. Like it was fine. It's just it was there were elements in play that I think hamstrung it in a lot of ways. And I think at the end, everyone's like, "Well, we got through it. It was fine. It was good enough." No, no, and
sure.
the outcome is what mattered more there than I think anything else.
Yeah, and that's a classic. Oh, this is on here. It's historic. I get it.
Yeah.
Uh, Becky and Charlotte or Becky was the biggest star in the company at that time.
Hmm.
So you know, I totally see. And maybe if we watch them in a future watch along for Ronda Rousey month
Yeah.
whenever we do schedule that. Now that she's back,
But I think she's
we
also
might.
unback now too, so I think we might have missed
Oh,
our window
great.
already.
Still, we need to commemorate our love of
That would- that would,
Ronda
that would be our
Rousey or
second Ronda watch along too, that's a lot of Ronda watch alongs.
and that other Ronda watch along is on this list, and I
That's
think
right.
that
Yeah,
that
that's
deserves to
true.
be on the list. I think that
That
was one of the
does.
best matches of that night.
We enjoyed that
Um,
one very much.
anything on the list you think is grossly underrated or overrated? I have like, I mean, we could play this game all day, but ultimately, I'm just there's just so many ways to look at this and scrutinize. But I'm just
Yeah,
curious
and
if there's
and like
anything else
trying
that,
not to not say like, well, this one's 27 and it should be 23 or ahead of this one that's right. That's nickel and diming. But I will say I think it's kind of egregious to have Savage versus Hogan from WrestleMania 5 at number 27. I just think that's one of the all-time great feuds. I think that's a literally 12-month long feud, if not longer, in terms of the Mania 4 Savage win, Hogan getting involved, the Mega Powers, the dissolving in the Mega Powers. Like that's just such a great example of, especially for that era, of just real long form wrestling storytelling. And then a very good match where I think Hogan, actually gets his working boots on, and Savage is just. It was such a rare Hogan match for that era too, not facing like an oaf, he's or a monster. He was just facing Macho Man, and like I just think that's just a very good match, an excellent feud, like a great period at the end of a sentence. And I think 27 is just a very silly, low place to put. Like under Piper versus Brett Intercontinental title match. Again, I'm not trying to nitpick things that are just above it, but there's some couple above it where I'm like, come on, that's one of the most important matches in WWF history.
Yeah, Stone Cold, Kevin Owens,
Yeah.
like whatever the fuck you want to call that match. That's the fact that it's on this list is
Yeah, that
kind
was
of
just such a like,
silly.
pleasant drinking beer, killing time match, It's,
Yeah, that would have been my take a giant shit match, even though I guess it was the main event. But
yeah, I was gonna say you've been holding your shit in for a long time.
yeah,
Did anything jump out of you at a similar way?
oh man, I mean the few that I'll say, the one I'm going to point out here is Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair probably deserves to be higher than
Yes.
34. I mean, I remember watching that match with non-fans at the time in College Park who are very big skeptics. They're like, what the fuck is this shit? They watch that match and they're like, okay, now I understand wrestling. There's a magic to that match. Not even the best match. There's a magic to that match that is just like that could have only taken. It's with one of the two of the greatest wrestlers of all time happening on the biggest stage, telling a retirement angle, which is always some of the most emotional, best storytelling in wrestling,
Yep.
and they did it in a way that like captured the hearts of everybody. And I don't know. I think I personally would put that above the Usos versus Owens and Zayn from like
Which is
a few
another
years ago.
very fun match, but also one that gets the recency bump, is that random tag match where Owens and Sammy get their one ups, their the come up on the Usos. Yeah, that's like great. That was fun. Yeah, then I forgot about it when it was over. But
Yeah. So
Michael's
anyway,
Flair, yeah, is really and like such a great, obviously you said two of the all-time greats and such a simple story, and told by two of, I would say wrestling's best like broad actors too, like just think about the Michaels, the I love you, I'm sorry, and like Flair's whole career of just being the, shit-eating heel and cheating and all of his bullshit. Like they both are so good at like being like, and Michaels obviously played that up so much more in that Hogan match eventually when he just flip flopped all over the ring. But like both
well,
those guys just like are so perfect at that kind of business, just like standing out in the ring, being interesting, being silly, being exciting. You can't take your eyes off them, and then like to have them even in their older days. Do this, like I said, do this like very simple, straightforward match. We got Arn coming in. No, Arn. That's the different match. Arn comes in the Flair match, right? Or
the
Arn,
Flip
the Taker
Taker.
match.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Correct. No,
Okay.
there was no shenanigans on this one. It was
So it was
just
okay. So it was just pure wrestling then, yeah, which is
two
even
men
better.
just telling a fucking story.
Yeah, and it is great. And like that is definitely one where you look at it and you're like, come on, 34. Like now we're gonna get nitpicky on underneath another Flair match against Savage to ruin the initial Flair run, which
Yeah.
is a run that no one finds satisfying.
Oh yeah, I probably should have used that as an example of crappy. No offense to the Usos and Zayn and Owens, because yeah, nobody fucking gives a shit about Ric Flair
Yeah,
versus Randy
one
Savage
of the
in
more
1992.
if you tell people that match happened and it was a WrestleMania and it was a title match and it was beloved, they'd be like, I believe objectively those things are true, except for the beloved part. But it's just, why is that not something we discuss? Like that whole Flair run, as discussed many times on the show, is just like just was such a quiet, fart in church. And that I guess fart in church would be even more loud. It was like it was like squeezed out a little tiny, beep, and just everyone turned and looked and it was over. So
Yeah, I
really,
mean, the fact that Flair Savage is ahead of two two male tearjerker matches and Michael HBK and Flair retirement, and then the Kofi Mania match right afterwards. It's
yep,
like I don't think anyone's ever shed a tear of joy for Randy Savage winning in 1992. I don't think anyone gave a fuck.
yep, agreed.
Anyway, sorry, Randy. We love you still, but
We do. Yeah. You're great. R.I.P. Great rap album, but
and
not.
actor.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean it's like I said, it's really just at a certain point you run into, this especially as you get towards the end of the list. Like you get to you're reminded so much of what WrestleMania means to so many people, which is the one night of the year they watch wrestling, or, you know, an example to just do some, just bring some big names out there for, for the rub or for, just to get eyeballs and ratings. Like Goldberg versus Lesnar for the title, Rock versus Cena, Sting versus Triple H, even the Cody debut match. Like some of this stuff, I'm just like, it's relevant and it's good and it matters. And to certainly amateur wrestler historians like us, you can make the case for all that stuff, and I wouldn't argue against its importance in some way, and and its place on those cards and its place in in relatively objectively good WrestleMania history. But just seeing it all ranked above so much other stuff, I'm like, I just don't know, like so much of that stuff is good because of WWE telling you it's good over and over again, of
Yeah.
insisting that this matters, where the with you if the proof is not really in the pudding.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is WWE telling you, "Hey, remember this? That was cool."
And
This
50
is,
is a lot. 50 is, you do have to get, like, you can't, it's hard to do a 50 and not put Rock Cena on there. It's hard to do a 50 and not put Sting's big match on there. Like, I get all that. Like, there's no harm in it, but it just, it illustrates for me why, with WrestleMania right around the corner, why I'm just not really interested in watching this year is like, I just think looking at this card and looking at, some of these forgettable matches in these forgettable years, I'm just like, there's just, there's times when they have the juice and there's times where they don't. And every year they must insist that the juice exists more than ever, and this is huge, and this matters, this is important. And when it just there's times where it's just clearly myth making with no substance there, and so
yeah.
you gotta do it, but it doesn't mean we have to believe it and take it at face value.
I do think though that with our focus on the top 10 in a bit, like, or right now, maybe I don't know if we're going to pivot to that soon, but I do think that the myth, the machine, the machine marketing machine myths do kind of fizzle out, and it does become a little bit more like, okay, these are the ones that I think we can all agree are pretty good to very good to extremely memorable, uh, which is good because yeah, you know. There's a lot in the bottom half of the list that you're right that they're telling you, hey, remember that was a classic. I'm like, I guess
I saw it at the time and I watched it a few years ago, and I don't concur.
I
Which
can't
I will
muster the
say,
strength to like recall another match to fire to argue with you, but I would like to believe that that's not right.
well, here's what I will, the top two matches on here. I want to talk about those, and like we can go through more of the top 10 or the top five if you like. But one of the reasons I, without quibbling over the exact order, one of the reasons I like Taker versus Michaels from Mania 25 and Brett versus Stone Cold from Mania 13 is those are matches that have taken on a life of their own after the match because they were so excellent, like where they sort of
Mhm.
stumbled into this incredible moment with Austin, making him a superstar, where they stumbled into not the streak, because I was just watching the Taker match. They mentioned the streak, but that's where it really became a thing, and it
Yeah.
cemented those two. They absolutely go on and have another great match the year after. Like these are both matches that were clearly everyone was like, sure, of course, we'll give them 30 minutes and we'll give them decent spots on the card, and they're not mains, but they're important and they matter and they have good wrestlers in them, important wrestlers. But both of them were so excellent that they've taken on a life of their own that is fully deserved. Like they're the kind of thing that no one is quibbling about. No one is saying, I don't know about that. Like they are that good because they earned the right to be called that good. And what they've become after the fact, it matters so much more, not because of any manufacturing or any self-promoting, but because it was the apex of what wrestling can be in the ring, with these characters that are larger than life and made themselves even more important, in arguably they're all four of those guys, the premier matches of their entire careers. So like I think something like that is just that earns its right to be here, and then spawns, careers and legacies out from them, just by dint of them being so excellent, shining so bright. I just think that's the kind of thing that does make WrestleMania feel important, even when it's not, because you're like, well, remember that 15 years ago? Like, holy shit, that was really good. 30 years ago? Damn, they really had lightning in a bottle there.
Yeah. What I do love too is one and two are represented by wrestlers.
Hmm.
And you're not going to see like Bad Bunny or Jelly Roll in those spots. You know what I mean? Like there's no celebrity bullshit. There's no, like even Rock Hogan. I'm looking at, I'm like, they're the two biggest stars, but wrestlers,
Yep.
like, you know,
I wanted to include
Hogan
that too
is
because
never.
that took such the reason that was so good is it became something totally different obviously when they got in the ring, you know? So like it sort of fits the same parameters I'm talking about because everyone was like, okay, cool, like what's this gonna be? Like these two big stars, like and then when you get there, it's what no one really anticipated or saw coming. And everybody rolled with it so perfectly. And again, it was just like ding
Yeah.
ding ding, this thing, wow, like this is taking on a life of its own
Uh,
and has become something bigger than we ever could have thought possible.
yeah, I would say that these like top three, even four, uh, there's that element of like surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I knew it was gonna be good, but I never thought it could be that good. Like even with like look at Savage and Steamboat, that wasn't in the main event. It was a completely different kind of match. And at the time, that one suffers, I think, obviously from the time has led to just better wrestling
Yep.
because that was known for its wrestling and at the time compared to like Hogan Andre, but yeah, but like these top four matches were not main events,
Yep.
and but at the same time, it's like of course Undertaker and Shawn Michaels are gonna put together the greatest fucking 25 minutes of
Yeah. And like you said, they're
fake
gonna get
fighting
big
I've
and
ever
they're gonna
seen.
get 30 minutes in the ring, they're gonna get big intros. Like it's the clearly it didn't sneak up on anybody, but at the same time, I'm sure everybody involved, and the moment was like, well, of course H Orton is the main and we will give that, the weight it deserves. And then I remember I think they even say, don't they say they're like, fuck, we have to follow that.
Yeah,
This is not good for us. Like that was
yeah.
way better than what we'll do.
I will say number one and number three, Rock Hogan and Taker Michaels. Triple H has been just suffered from following a match after both of those
It's true.
for the title, and it just yeah. Sorry, H.
Yeah, like we said, it's them being up there, and then the reassurance of the first H match is not until let's see the highest ranked H match on here. Hell in a Cell with Taker number 18. Probably not really number 18, but again, the fact that we don't get and then the tag match with Ronda and Angle, which is H in a tag match, and like there's just a refreshing, not like non-reliance on the Triple H style for which he's maligned fairly and unfairly for and sort of inserting himself into these spots and taking too much time. But yeah, the stuff that is earned and the stuff that is at the top of the list is really something is stuff that's special and is
Yeah,
very organic, and in its own way. And I think that's just it really is a reminder that's what we want to see from these big shows. We want to see, it's some weird Vince McMahon brass ring bullshit in sort of a way, where it's you're already a star, you're already a superstar, you're already a legend, but you take that little step up or you take that big step up by just going out there and doing something truly special on this kind of a show.
yeah. I mean, I will say, and I know we have 50 matches, and I personally key in on Taker Michaels at the number one spot. But watching that match, I'm like, this is. I said this out loud. This is the greatest wrestling match I've ever seen, and it's been how many years, and I still feel that way. I'm like, that was
17.
the greatest fucking match I've ever seen,
Do you
and
think it's that
you
much
know,
better than the Streak versus Career one is number 26? Do you think is the first one that much better than the second one?
yes, a million
Yeah.
percent.
Wow.
And the reason being is it's unexpected.
Yeah.
Like you didn't know they were gonna
Yeah,
have the
yeah,
greatest
because
match.
then the sequel is like you said, they have a hook to it now, and they're playing off the last one, and it becomes sort of the understandably promoted
Derivative.
spectacle that they do so well. Like
Yeah.
they've realized what they have, and they're maxing it out, and no fault there at all. That's exactly what they should have done, and made it still another very good match. But yeah, it didn't catch anybody unawares at that point. It was what it was.
Yeah. But like I look at some of this list too, and like watching Warrior Savage, for example, I'm like, there's there's something or TLC even. Like there's something really like special happening here that you can't. That's actually an interesting one on the list, number nine. Um, the retirement match,
I haven't
which
seen
is
that match in
hilarious because
forever.
Macho Man. It's still pretty like. I mean, not that I've watched it in the last 3 decades, but like there's something really. wonderful about that match. But anyway, but so the original question about like was the first one better than the second, and typically yes.
Yeah, that's fair. we're, we're running out of time here, but I do want to know one quick thing too, is the Iron Man match being on the list. What do you think about that? That was a
Mm,
formative match for us as kids, but again, I think that was another, it's a gimmick in that obviously it's a 60 minutes. It's long, but long does not, of course, equal good. Long equals long.
yeah, in this case, that's a match that we can say for sure was not taken up by entrance time.
Yeah.
That was truly was an hour plus, and not for the better. I mean, I don't know. I would never fucking want to watch that match again. To be
Yeah,
perfectly
I was
honest.
not in my head. I was toying with doing a watch along to that, but that would truly take an incredible.
Yeah.
That would be maybe our longest episode of all time, and just watching along. We would run out of things to say so fast.
Yeah, right. Oh,
Probably a
another
lot of
rest
like
hold,
arm
and
bars
we're
and chin locks and stuff. Probably just a lot of really killing time.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I did see that, and I had those same thoughts, but I opted not to bring it even up because of fear running
Which
of
is a
running
weird,
out
just
of time here.
a weird example of something that it was in a relatively non-bombastic era, but they still made this big match and the type of gimmick match they would almost never ever do ever again, especially the way they do it with these good wrestlers, and like it could be one of those ones that deserves its spot because it was so well done, but in reality everyone looks back and goes, like I get what they were going for, but no, not really.
Yeah, I mean, it's Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, and they could have had a better, just regular ass match, probably.
Yeah, probably. I think we'd like that a lot more. Could give him 25 minutes. We all would have had a great time.
Yeah, I'm sure it would have been epic, but instead we
But
had
I remember,
45 minutes of
I
wrestling.
remember it holding our interest as whatever we were, fucking 12-year-olds though. So that's fascinating that we sat there and watched the entire thing.
I can't remember one fucking spot though,
No, I can't either.
except for the end.
Yeah, me too. Well, we're not going to do it on this show, so I think that's a definitive answer. I think there's not even a bottom of the barrel that goes that low. Not that it's the worst thing ever, just the commitment is ample.
Yeah, and the tape machines on Zoom would be rolling well
Tape
before the
Machine,
60
my
minutes.
my my boy Tape Machine is about to do that match on his what's it called, 30 years back thing. So
Maybe
it's a very
I'll
yeah.
read along with them. Yeah.
Well, if you have a sec, go check out the greatest WrestleMania matches playlist on YouTube on the WWE's channel. It's a fascinating look at all that stuff, and like we said, all things considered, a pretty good representation of a lot of what makes WrestleMania special, for better and worse. Largely for better. They could have done a much worse job putting that all together. So go check that out. If you want more Awesome Truth, you can find our archives at awesometruth.libsyn.com for episodes old and new, especially new. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts are delivered. We are there. Well, I think this is our last match before Mania. So enjoy if you watch. I think I'm actually going to watch. I just got a random ESPN subscription. So I think I'm going to
Wow.
watch Mania. Hooray.
Congratulations.
Can't wait for Oba
Uh,
Femi versus Brock Lesnar, for Jacob Fatu versus Drew, for Sami Zayn, Trick Williams. Oh, the card just titans of
oh God, there's
wrestling.
two nights of this.
And
Shit. Well,
we'll see. Maybe it'll
damn it.
surprise us. Sometimes they do.
Yeah, I'll have to get your review of it and
All
then
right.
cherry pick the best matches.
All right. We'll report back. Sounds good. Thank you all so much for listening. And remember, the truth will set you free.